call our Board of Education meeting to open at 4:01 p.m. on Tuesday, December 12th. The first item we have is public comment. Ms. Siebold, will you see if we have any public comment, please? There's not? Okay. Ms. Wilderson, check. Okay.
We'll double check.
No? Thank you. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Under 3-305, the general provisions of the Annotated Code of Maryland allows public bodies to meet in closed session by conducting a recorded vote on closing the session for certain stipulated reasons. Those reasons for closing this meeting are as follows: review of minutes, personnel, negotiations, legal opinion, and administrative function. I'd like to reopen our meeting to public session. Our first item is our consent agenda, which includes November 14, 2017 board minute meetings, field trips, professional leave requests, retirement notification and stipend as amended, composition of negotiation teams. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further questions or discussions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Consent agenda motion is passed. At this moment, may I have everyone stand for a moment of silence, please? This evening, our student board member Cheyenne is at home, and I have something to read for her, which we're glad that she decided to stay out instead of come out in this weather. So I'll have Mr. Paul to do our Pledge of Allegiance, please. Lead it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our next item is our closed session summaries. Ms. Baker.
Hold on a second.
Pardon me?
Word docs. Okay, then I didn't think I saw them in here. Okay. That's worse. Okay, the Board of Education met in executive session on Tuesday, November 14th, 2017 at Central Office in the boardroom at 3:03 p.m. under Authority 3-305 of the General Provisions of the Annotated Code of Maryland to discuss the following items: negotiation topics, healthcare options and coalition update, board meeting minutes, personnel topic, field trips, legal opinion, and administrative function topics. The board recessed the executive session at 4:04 p.m. to go into the public session to see if there was public comment. As there was no public comment, the board reconvened at 4:05 p.m. to continue the executive session and the following topics: discussion of negotiations topics, healthcare options and coalition update, board meeting minutes, personnel topic, field trips, legal opinion, and administrative function topics. Matthew Paul made a motion to adjourn the executive session, and Charlotte Siebold seconded the motion. The board unanimously approved adjourning the executive session at 5:40 p.m. Board members present included Mrs. Monica Rinker, President, Mr. Matthew Paul, Vice President, board members Mrs. Charlotte Siebold and Mr. Tom Woods. Dr. Nathan Sorber joined the beginning of the meeting via conference call until he was able to attend the meeting in person at 4:03 p.m. Mrs. Barbara Baker, Secretary Treasurer, Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Brandon Hoover, Board Attorney, Mrs. Karen DeBoer, Executive Director of Curriculum Instruction Administration, Mrs. Allison Schweitzer, Director of Finance, Dr. Jane Wildison, Director of Human Resources, and Mr. Jeff Gank, Director of Information Technology, were present for part of the meeting. Mr. Mark Mike Marcini, CBiz Business Unit President of the Benefits and Retirement Division, was also present for part of the meeting to present healthcare options to the board. Mrs. Karen Brewer, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent, was present for part of the meeting for the purpose of taking minutes.
Thank you. Our next item is our announcements. Ms. Baker?
Okay, so on the announcements, on December 22nd, we have a 3-hour early dismissal for students. December 25th through January 1st is our winter break, and schools will reopen on January 2nd. There are a variety of events happening for holiday programs. The weather may affect those slightly, so we do have a December calendar, but I would say check with each school if you're interested in attending.
Thank you. We had scheduled one recognition this evening. It's Maryland State FFA champion dairy handler Samantha Wilt. But due to the weather, we're also glad that she chose to stay home, so we will postpone her recognition for the month of January. Okay. Our next item under policies and procedures, our first one is EEBAA, Vehicle Use Procedure, and it has been revised.
Good evening.
Good evening.
With the approval to purchase the 2 vehicles that we're going to place at each high school, I wanted to make sure that we added some guidelines to our current procedure for the individuals who will be assigned to transport students with these vehicles. I added, there's 14 guidelines that I inserted in this document. I can go over them individually, or if you had a chance to look at that, I can take questions, whatever's going to be the best way to do that for you.
Does anyone have any questions? I actually had a question. Under what we had before, number 2 procedures, it says directors or supervisors of departments are responsible for, and it has all the things. But there again, I think I'd asked before, it says be sure all vehicles are regularly cleaned. So who would be, because these are 2 vehicles, pool vehicles, who would be the director, advisor, or supervisor of them? The principals at the high schools, or?
They'll fall under the principal, and then we'll probably have a designee to however the structure is going to be within the school.
Okay.
We're going to rely on people in the school to manage it, and however that's set up at the school level.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I do have another question.
Okay.
And you've also added F under their high schools, and it goes on. So it says the vehicles are to be utilized to provide transportation for small groups of students in order for them to participate in a wide variety of school-related activities both in and out of the county. Activities may include, but not limited to, athletics, FFA, JRTC, robotics, etc. The vehicles may also be used by school staff and administration to attend state and local meetings. So will someone, I guess a principal of each school will have like a chart saying like a certain group needed it, would they, so one group was obligated or already had?
The priority will be the students first. But if the vehicle's sitting there and there's a meeting that a principal needs to attend or somebody, they follow the guidelines to get approved to drive it. Would allow them to go attend the meeting using the vehicle in lieu of the mileage reimbursement that they would get.
Okay.
But again, still we make sure students have the priority.
Right.
But again, they talk a lot about some schools having a Google Calendar, however they're going to manage that within the building.
Okay.
We'll rely on them to do that, okay?
Okay, that's all good. Yes, you may.
Question under section D, the new section about using the pool vehicles. The next to last bullet point says that there needs to be a student permission form signed by the parents. Is that every single time they ride in the vehicle, or once per school year, once per trip?
It'll probably be once per school year. Probably we would start off with the program that we know is probably going to use it the most, and then keep those on file. But then as any other individual programs need to use that, we make sure that we have one on file that the parent understands that they're going in this vehicle. Okay?
Thank you.
In that bullet point, you're missing the word "N" and the end of vehicle.
In the very last part, yeah, transported the vehicle.
Okay.
And Mr. Hoover, that was actually several years ago. We did that for other field trips. This would follow the same policy. Parents were filling out, many trips to Hickory and things that were just normal trips. So we went with that a few years ago. It's been very successful. Then if there are other trips, then they would have to fill out the form.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you. Our next one is JLCCB, Administration of Healthcare Services to Students with Diabetes, Policy and Procedure, and this is new. Sorry. And we have Dr. Lauber.
She was so excited.
Take one chair away.
See, people really want to present to the Board of Education.
Thank you all.
This is a policy and procedure and implement a new changing COMAR that address more specific management of diabetes. And of course, we were providing care prior to this, but this became more specific in the expectations to provide care for diabetic students. And the policy just indicates that we will provide management for diabetes. And in COMAR, it says that we will provide diabetes care services so that students with diabetes can remain safe in school, be supported for optimal academic achievement, and fully participate in all aspects of school programming, including after-school activities and other school-sponsored events. And of course, we are seeing an increase in diabetes among students. Procedures, I can maybe just briefly review those procedures. This addresses the purpose of that, looks at the background of diabetes of children in the schools, recognizes the need for a team approach for the care of students, development of individualized health plans, emergency plans, school staff training, and educational supports for students with diabetes. And then it goes into a number of different definitions that pertain to diabetic students and the care of a student with diabetes. Then it goes into procedure, notes that some students may need special accommodations. Again, it provides collaborative relationship among the healthcare provider, the school, and the home. The student's family, the healthcare provider, the school nurse, and school staff are all responsible for management of the student's needs. Addresses the what's called CLIA waiver for certain procedures that are done in schools, such as finger sticks and assessment of a student. Those are considered laboratory procedures, and the requirement for the maintenance of a lab. There's certain requirements for that, and those we apply every year for a waiver from those requirements that we receive. Education and training of school personnel. The purpose of that is to develop awareness of diabetes, understanding the management of that. There's 3 different levels of training, and be provided by the school nurse or another qualified person that's designated to provide that training. First level is just awareness of management. That's for all school staff that they become aware of diabetes, signs of diabetes and management of it. Level 2 training is to those school staff that have responsibility for a student that has diabetes, such as teacher in the classroom that would have a diabetic child. And then level 3 is training to the specific staff that are responsible for the care of that diabetic student. There's 3 different levels of training. Coordination of care is the next section. Again, addresses the need for collaboration and cooperation to provide for the management of the diabetic student. Addresses the diabetes medical management plan, and you'll see that that's addressed several other places in the procedures. Addresses the individualized health care plan, emergency care plans. Notice in some cases, not all, there may be a 504 or IEP for the student. And then the need for diabetic care to follow the diabetes medical management plan of that student. Recognizes the healthcare provider would provide orders for the care, and that would be incorporated into individualized health plan for the student. Notes the actions of the school nurse in providing for the management of the diabetic student. Addresses the responsibilities of the parent guardian for the diabetic student. Notes the student responsibilities that they have for their care. Addresses school responsibilities for the care of the diabetic student. And then the school administrator responsibilities, which covers all those areas and seeing that it's being implemented correctly for that student in their school. So that's just an overview of the policy and procedure for that. Are there any questions about that?
Anybody have any questions? There is a lot of pages to this.
There's a guideline that was published by Maryland State Department of Education that we received in October. It came out in draft form in May, but then went through different revisions. A rather lengthy guideline. So this was drawn, of course, from Omar and the guidelines for implementation.
Now, you said that our numbers have increased.
Yes, they have.
So does this have an impact on the nurses that we have in the school system now?
One of the major impacts, if the physician provides an order for full-time nurse care for that child, if the diabetic student has chronic diabetes, if they're a fragile diabetic where they need that full-time nursing care, and the physician orders that, then we need to provide full-time nursing care. Yes, that does impact it because we have several students right now that are required to have full-time nurse care. And if they have been in a school where there's not a full-time nurse, then we have to find the means of providing a full-time nurse to that school.
Would that extend beyond the school hours?
It does.
So
Any
if they were
school activities, school sponsored activities, field trips. Often the nurse will accompany the student on a field trip, so we have to get a substitute nurse in the school to cover what their duties would have been in the school for that day. And so it definitely has a fiscal impact on the schools, and we are seeing an increase in diabetic students, and especially the fragile diabetics.
So then by reading this too, it looks like not only do you have the nurse, but then also, and since the nurse could not be there, there would be somebody else in that school
We had to have a
that
nurse.
knew that students' the case and was well aware of everything. Trained.
If there is a doctor's orders, then we have to find the means of providing a full-time nurse. If the nurse is absent, we can't find a sub,
Right.
we have to get another nurse there to cover. So we have no choice but meeting that order for a full-time nurse, so that's what's been ordered by the physician.
But it almost looks like that there was also somebody else trained in the,
Well, we have our CMTs trained.
Right, someone else in the school.
Right. And then, of course, there is training for the classroom teacher or whoever's involved with that child throughout the day. Not in the sense of like the nurse would have, but there is training to be aware of that child, and if they would go into insulin shock or something like that, to be aware of those signs.
I have a question.
yes.
When we were going over this in policy, on page 2, under number 3, definitions, you see blood glucose monitoring. At the end of that sentence, it had bolus, B-O-L-U-S, and we decided that that needed to go before the insulin, which is, you have insulin, and then the definition is a dose of rapid-acting or short-acting insulin. So don't we still need to put that B-O-L-U-S in
No, that
front of
wasn't-
insulin?
Yeah, it just did not need to be there. Mrs. Aiken, our nurse manager, helped develop this with us.
Okay, so that's not a special kind of insulin?
No.
Oh, okay, because in the policy committee, in the committee when we went over it.
That extra word was there.
Yeah, it was at the end of this sentence, and it was determined it needed to go before insulin, but if it doesn't need to go there.
She said
Okay,
just remove it.
great.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Then policy and procedure, JLF on reporting child abuse and or neglect.
Yes.
And of course, all school staff are mandated reporters if they have any suspicion that there may be child abuse or neglect. They are required to report that. Two changes are made throughout the policy and procedure. One is that what was called Department of Social Services is now called Department of Human Services, DHS. So that change was made throughout the two documents. And then second is the Garrett County Sheriff Office requested that when we report child abuse and neglect, and under COMAR, we can report either to Department of Human Services or to law enforcement. They ask that we also report to the school resource officers. When we report to Department of Human Resources, they would also do a report to the school resource officer, so they're aware of that report. And they gave an example, for some reason, a parent or someone was upset coming to school, a school resource officer would be aware of that situation. So throughout the document, we added, where it did say or, we put and in and specified that the report would be made both to Department of Human Resources and to the school resource officer. So those changes were made in the policy and the procedures.
So initially, say a teacher would notify the principal or assistant principal, correct?
Well, they still, whoever the school staff was, if they had suspicion of
Right.
abuse, they would notify the principal, but it was their obligation to report directly to Human Services, and now we've added to the school resource officer. So they aren't relieved of the obligation by simply reporting to the principal. They do that so the principal's aware.
Right.
But usually they'll sit with the principal then and make that report to the Department of Human Services and also to the school resource officer.
So the thing that's new in here is being added is for that same person to notify the Garrett County Sheriff's Office or the school resource officer.
And both.
So what is the reason that they're to notify them also? Like,
The Garrett County Sheriff Office has asked that we also inform the school resource officer when there's a report. And again, in the past, COMAR did allow for a report to law enforcement in lieu of reporting to Human Services. You could report to either one. We always reported to Department of Human Services. The Sheriff's Office asked that we now also include the school resource officer, so they're aware of that report in case there be any implications for the school in making that report.
right. I understand why they need to know. Who notified them before if it
No
wasn't?
one, they were not notified.
They were not, okay.
Yeah, because it met the obligation of COMAR by reporting to Department of Human Services.
Well, Human Services may have reported it too.
Right, often they
We
did.
didn't.
They have a,
Well, we may have, but it wasn't an and like it is now.
right.
Does every elementary school have an assigned resource officer?
They have an assigned one,
Assigned,
I mean, up
yeah.
in the building, but they have
Yeah,
an assigned.
I guess that was my thing that I
Right.
kept catching up on is that officer may very infrequently see that student in that building unless they're called there.
Right.
For some reason, because I'm sure they don't go to every building every
They
day.
do
Not
not.
routine.
Yeah.
We currently have one. One's the southern end of the county, one's the northern end of the
There's
county?
three resource
Three, okay.
officers, yeah, two on the southern end though. Lieutenant Warnick also has accidents unsigned school. And then we have one on the northern end.
So I know this isn't part of the policy change, but just so I'm clear, because it's an awareness, it's any of our employees or volunteers who become aware, either actively engaged in work of the county or in non-work hour time.
Oh, yes.
If
Right.
They have any suspicion.
We are mandatory report,
Right,
yes.
right.
Yeah.
Any other questions or concerns? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next one is ILAB mandated assessment policy. And this is our second reading, so we take an action on it this evening.
Hello, again. I'm here this evening to answer any questions that you may have about either of the policy changes before taking action.
Anyone have any questions or concerns?
I was expressing my concern last month. Mr. Edwards, maybe you could, I know when we had our calendar committee meeting, you'd expressed some ideas that I think the two high school principals were talking a little bit about in terms of final exams. Could you enlighten maybe the rest of us about what your thoughts might be about that?
Well, the main impetus is the Less Testing, More Teaching Act. That's the driving force behind this, but then ancillary to that, we just had a meeting today at the college with the principals, and a part of that conversation, we're looking at the student educational planning guide, and the guidance counselor there, we were talking about the possibility of tonight's meeting of taking away the mandate for final exams, and the conversation went back to the same things. It would be optional for teachers. It would not only be optional to give or not to give, but it would be optional in format, meaning term paper, project, that type of stuff, rather than just comprehensive paper pencil test. But it would be optional for the teacher, and some teachers that teach AP or a PARC or HSA class would question, why are we going to give an AP exam, which is a comprehensive final exam, and then 2 weeks later turn around and give them basically the exact same test for the class? So you're really duplicating the test at that point. The same could be said for PARC, HSA, that type of thing. So that was the conversation of that. There are some teachers that, regardless of what you decide tonight, are definitely going to give the final exam if it's optional and they're allowed to do that and they want to do that. There are many that will not. And there are many that will do alternative things.
And I guess as the new procedure and policy is written, we would take away the 20% value as well.
It would be, we had that discussion today as well. Our thought is it would be folded in, but because in Power School, teachers have the ability to, and not to complicate this for everybody, but teachers, the default for Power School is 25% for a quarter. We have to manually manipulate that to make it 20%. Depending on how the teachers wanted to organize it, some of them probably could keep it that way if they wanted to do it that way. As long as it was in their syllabus.
Sure.
Exactly. As long as it was in their syllabus and they informed parents and students up front. There might be a handful that would like to continue to do that. I think they would definitely be the minority. But I think a lot of teachers, even if they do give the final exam, will just make it a percentage value of the 25% of the fourth quarter.
Any other questions or discussions? Do I have a motion to accept JLAB mandate assessment policy?
Yeah, so moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Just a quick question.
It is Idaho.
What did I say? Oh, okay. Okay. Any further questions or discussions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. ILAB mandate assessment policy, motion has passed. Our next item is classroom assessment policy.
If you recall, this policy was written to correspond with the procedure that was already in existence. And then those listing of procedures was the designation for final exams. So basically, this policy just authorizes teachers to give assessments as an option. Measurement at any time, not just final exams, but throughout the quarter, as long as it is intended to drive instruction or measure progress of students towards mastery of the content standards.
Do you have any further questions or discussions? And this again is our second reading.
Yeah, I'm probably confused, but on the procedure part, the 20% is still there, is the count as 20% of the final grade for a particular class?
I believe those were bracketed, which means they were taken out.
Oh, I see. I didn't see the final bracket. Yeah, I understand. So all that's taken out.
Yes, sir.
So it looks like it just be those three sentences there that are underlined. That would be the new. Any further questions, comment, discussion?
Motion to approve IIE policy.
Second.
Any further questions or discussions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. IIE, classroom assessment policy, motion passed. Our next item is new business. We have Ms. Schweitzer, I believe, speaking from IRS mileage rate. Thank you.
Yes, this is really more of the informational piece. The IRS will be releasing the new 2018 mileage reimbursement rate any day now, but not today. And it wasn't yesterday either. So historically, they do release it before the 15th. So what I would like to ask is that once it is released, we send an email to the board notifying them. This is due to the fact that the rate is part of the mileage, reimbursement mileage form that is part of the procedure, DKCA, which is the mileage reimbursement procedure. So obviously the board did not take action on the procedure, but you do need to be notified that it's updated. This will make my life and the finance team's lives much more efficient once we begin the new year if the rate is updated and the communication has been made to all staff. That's really all I needed to explain.
Thank you. So are we waiting for the email once you
Yes.
get the numbers? Thank you. Under continuing business is a RISE strategic plan update and findings. Let's start with Ms. Baker.
Okay, I'm going to take just a moment break. We're going to be moving over to
Sure.
And I believe when we started setting up the agenda for this part, in the interest of time, we decided to go ahead and start because we still have at least a half an hour for public comment. So I can stop at 7,
that's
and
fine.
we can invite public comment.
Yes.
And then I can continue.
Okay, thank you.
So if you just give us a minute to, I think Mrs. Schweitzer's going to come.
Yes, you may begin.
Thank you. All right, well, members of the board, thank you very much. We have quite a lot of information to present to you this evening. I want to thank Mrs. Schweitzer for joining me at the table when we talk about all things financial. But also you'll see that I have my majority of my cabinet team here this evening, both of my instructional directors, Director of HR, Director of Transportation, and also our Supervisor of Pupil Services is here as well. So as we go through, what we thought we would do was, as we go through each part, if you have questions, just stop me. And certainly my executive director is here as well, so we can answer questions as we go. You won't have to hold them then until the end. Okay? All right. So first of all, I want to make sure the public and to remind the board that, you know, we are constantly doing strategic planning. I know we're working on a formal plan moving forward, but we have been working under a plan since 2014, at which time the Board of Ed determined goals for the school system. And after those goals were developed in 2014, then the superintendent's core team, which I was a part of at the time, and the lead team of instructional supervisors and directors, we developed a set of objectives and goals to align with the Board of Education goals. And then we had a set of under each objective, we had an indicator to meet each of the objectives. And we've been working towards those since 2015 when we developed them. The board may remember that I gave a presentation in February updating you on our work towards those goals at that time. Just as a reminder, these are the Board of Education goals, and I will reference them at throughout the presentation and also at the end. And you'll see these on various things throughout the central office. And I won't read each one, just that all students will be challenged in a rigorous instructional environment. We will partner with the community. All students and staff will learn in a safe, secure, and caring environment. Every department will be good stewards of system resources, and all of our employees will be highly qualified and effective in their jobs. So again, those were adopted by the board in 2014, and we follow them, and a good bit as we move through this plan, you'll see me reference them as well. So for instance, I just wanted to reference a couple of departments. Each department developed a set of objectives for strategic planning. This one is the Instructional and Information Technology team, and you can see some of the progress that they've made towards their goals would be increasing the number of devices, enhancing PowerSchool, and certainly custom software. In the last 5 years, we have updated student devices from 800 to more than 3,500. So, we continue to work towards that goal, but certainly that's only student devices. That doesn't include staff devices. And we also have a lot of things that come out as far as safety, security, that Jeff and his team are constantly working on. And then each department has goals, and you'll see Mr. Ganks and his team's goals there. We have 2 schools that are currently not on the high fiber network, but he continues to work with state and federal to find funds to do that. We have schools that are piloting one-to-one, want to continue to keep exploring places that we can find to fund that. And again, sustainability for his department as we move forward, the way our students learn and the way our teachers teach, embracing technology. The other department that was supposed to be right here is food and nutrition. You'll probably see it later, but for some reason it's not here. When we talk about food and nutrition services, his goals are to maintain his current staff and to continue with his equipment. He has lost about $157,000 over the last 5 years in a la carte sales. and smart snacks and some other things have led to that. But one thing I want to address with our Food and Nutrition Services Department is that they were a separate entity for many, many years. And now they are on board with us as far as all things. We've realigned our staff a little bit, and we've certainly brought them on board with all of our reporting and all of our record keeping. So we feel that that has certainly led us to goal number 4, which is being good stewards of the system resources. Okay, so we're going to delve a little bit now. Any questions so far? I have one slide that I'm not sure what happened to it, but I know what happened because it's supposed to be in real time, so I'm not sure, but we will find it. So I do want to just remind the board and remind the public, you know, as we look at programs and as we move forward with strategic planning, we have had to delete programs as we move to add programs in other areas. And we have had to delete, and this is by no means a comprehensive list. This is just an example of some programs that we have had to delete over the last few years. Driver's ed, masonry, childcare. We had dedicated gifted and talented teachers at the elementary level. We had math specialists at the elementary level. We've eliminated French and German at the high school level. We've eliminated family and consumer science at the middle school level. We had some instructional coaching positions that we eliminated. We've eliminated our show choir, show band. And one thing that I know the public, when I go out, a lot of people have asked me to think about reinstating is the activity buses. And that's been gone for several years, but it is something that we miss. There's Food and Nutrition Services popped up right there, so I already went over that one. But luckily, you know, as we reallocate resources, we have been able to add a lot of programs. We have our STARS program that is a pilot program this year that we've updated the board on. It's going very well. We do transport students in all areas of the county to the STARS program. You heard Ms. Rinker earlier mention the Orton Gillingham training that our students in our early childhood will be attending this year. We've had great success with our Learning Beyond the Classroom bus. We have improved our agricultural sciences with our new CASE curriculum. We've been able to increase our certification in our NIMS, our National Institute for Metalworking, and our BMF program, our Business Management and Finance. Also, we've added PLTW Biomedical, PLTW Gateway to Technology, and PLTW Engineering. And then we've increased our dual enrollment opportunities as well with Garrett College. So even though there are programs that we have lost, there are programs that we have been able to add.
Are any of those mandated programs, state mandated programs?
Any of the...
Project Lead the Way, Biomedical Science, Gateway Technology.
I will defer to our...
None of them are state mandated.
Those were options we picked up.
Correct.
As a system.
Correct. The way CTE works now, if we were to add a program today, regardless of what it is, there are state recommended programs. It would be very difficult to get a program approved to add that wasn't on the state program list. You could do it. So they're not mandated that we don't have to offer them, but if you want to offer law enforcement, they kind of have a program that you pretty much have to pick.
I guess my question was centered more around the taking away of vocational programs and the addition of Project Lead the Way programs, which...
And I think we mentioned it, you know, in the past as well, you know, less and less students taking some of those programs, and, you know, we've talked that some of them have been very important, keeping kids in school, have been very important for vocational, but these also, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Edwards, you know, a lot of what we've added are things that kids have been asking us and that they've been asking us to add or at least look into.
They are, technically, they're still CTE programs. Right. In the case of the Project Lead the Ways have to be recertified every 5 years, so there'll be a state team come up here every 5th year to look at. We just did biomedical science last year, got glowing reviews. When they did our engineering one several years back, there were some issues with the certification visit. their recommendation, they being MSDE, they're the ones that really questioned why we were offering so many CTE courses with the same sort of
Pathways.
yeah, and it was actually their recommendation to us to eliminate specifically drafting and electronics based off of their visit here. That was sort of the impetus to that. Our numbers were dwindling drastically there as well. In regards to PLTW engineering, as you well know, every student has to have a tech ed credit to graduate. There are only certain classes that are approved now to be a tech ed credit. 2 of them are through the Project Lead the Way engineering pathway. So if we didn't have that, it would be more challenging to offer that particular credit.
I guess I understand. I weigh the losses of those vocational programs as a way to perhaps enhance the economic environment in Garrett County by keeping those students here when they graduate with a degree in masonry and block and get a job in Garrett County and make the commissioners happy and education happy.
I think to say that we had to delete those as far as electronics, drafting, childcare. Actually, childcare was because of the state. They no longer accepted what we were teaching as childcare. So to say that these deletions were the cause of not having enough students or things like that, I think it has to be looked at as no longer did they said we couldn't teach electronics the way we were teaching it. We needed to get into digital electronics, and to do that we needed to go to the Project Lead the Way. So I mean, I think it's been more of a trade for the state rather than losing these because of the fact that we didn't have the monies to support them. Because we could still have every one of those programs. How the state would take that, I'm not sure. Nor,
Well, we certainly didn't lose driver's ed to a lack of students being interested.
Well, no, I agree with that.
Right.
But
So
the other,
somewhere-
as far as the
right.
gifted and talented teachers, gifted and talented has changed. As far as the math specialists, we were told that we were going to new math books. So we needed everybody to be trained. So, I think some of that has to be looked at as changing to something that is statewide, and we have been recommended by the state to take on. And I know that the Project Lead the Way, hopefully it will be taken as CTE and not as much as college prep. I think we need to work on that aspect of it and make it more accessible for all students, the ones that would have been in electronics and those other areas. Thank you.
Right. I absolutely agree, Ms. Siegel. These are things that we don't have anymore, and for a variety of reasons.
All right.
Other questions?
On your instructional programs, and you start listing your additions, the majority of them are middle school and high school. Is that correct? Like the top 3 is more like elementary and learning beyond the classroom.
Again, I just selected a sampling. It is by no means a comprehensive list.
But from 4 down, they are middle school and high school. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, what are, just briefly, what are the dual opportunity enrollment things that we've grown with Garrett?
It used to just be math and English.
Yeah, right.
Now we have opportunities via 4 different we have opportunities where students do a complete online. That would be nutrition. It's a totally online module with no teacher in front of them. We have a model where our teachers actually teach the class for the college. That would be Spanish. Our kids can get transcripted credit for Spanish 1 and 2 at Garrett College if they complete Garrett County Public School Spanish 1 and 2, 3 and 4. We have the college professors come in and teach in the schools the math and English now, and there's one class we actually do via distance learning, but we have art appreciation, the 4 different math and English classes, nutrition. There are 4 computer science classes. It's actually part of our computer science pathway now. Our teachers actually deliver that instruction. The Spanish, geography, geology, speech, U.S. history pre-Civil War, U.S. history post-Civil War, sociology. We're working right now, part of our meeting today is the business class. I don't know if that's nice. I can give you the whole list.
No, I'm just interested in how we progressed
And then we also have...
from 9 years ago.
Right, and part of that is too, we do have certain classes that are only offered, that our kids actually have to go to college to take. We can't offer them through the school. There are a few students, and generally that's done through a night class or a summer school session more so than during the day, but it could be during the day. But most of them, actually all of them except a handful, are done on the high school campus.
Good.
I think the dual enrollment is kind of a classic example of an opportunity we have to figure out in the strategic planning process. I know in my visits in the high school and the conversations, figuring out the AP dynamics and the advanced courses and what does our staffing model look like 10 years out in a world with more dual enrollment or new technologies and online learning. So that's just an example of, as we move forward, like I think those are the type of curricular opportunities with possible long-term fiscal or staffing impacts that we have to kind of take seriously as a trend to try to understand.
Our meeting today, the afternoon session was with the college folks, and it was all predicated on how can we expand even further on what we're doing. We also had a meeting here about a month ago with Frostburg State. Some potential tie-ins with them as well. So it doesn't have to be with Garrett, although Senate Bill, as you guys probably well know, Senate Bill 740 dictates we have to do more dual enrollments, but it doesn't say it has to be with College A or B. We could do it with WVU, we could do it with Pot State, we could do it with lots of opportunity there for sure.
All right, so it's probably a little clearer in your packet. Again, these are some of the next slide or two. This is the enrollment from 1990 to 2017. And this clicker doesn't have a little red dot, but I was going to show you the, when we had 1990 through about 95, 96, we were up a little, pretty stable, and then through 97, some of the Thornton years, they called them, where we had some hold harmless, where we were declining, but it really wasn't affecting us fiscally as much. And then we had a nice jump, and we were way down in 2009, and then back up again, thankfully, in 2010, and then again, so it is what it is. This does not include pre-K. This is excluding pre-K numbers, but it's just a chart to show you where we started in 1990 and now where we are today. Now the next slide is our historical expenditure just over the last couple of years, FY14 through 17. It's delineated here by elementary, middle, and high school. You'll see one of the spikes was in the middle, and did you want to explain that, or did you want me to?
Sure. In FY15, there was a spike in the middle school grade band expenditure per pupil. And that was primarily driven from Northern Middle, the drive to achieve that one-to-one device to student ratio. So that was the driver for that. As you can see, high school is traditionally, they are more expensive students to educate. It's just a fact of life. And elementary are, if you will, the cheapest to educate, or the least expensive. So, that this is a 4-year trend. There is a packet, a document that was provided to you that does give the school system as a whole, as well as each school individually, and then as well as the unallocated expenditures. And it's important for you to understand that the unallocated is not simply just the central office. Unallocated includes transportation, special ed, pupil services, health services, many of the, and in addition to teachers, diagnostic prescriptive teachers, some social workers, PPWs, that are all supporting the entire system, and they're not based at a particular school.
Right. We tried to provide that information in your packet. It was too much to try and put on a slide, so you have it. It should be in your packet.
We were discussing this a little bit earlier as we were looking at it. Where you have expenditures per student for each of the institutions in the central office, what does that include?
What expenditures?
Yeah, what does it include?
Well,
what would be the breakdown of the elements that make that up?
What I did is there is a larger spreadsheet, actually 4 more spreadsheets that tie into this, and we have direct costs to the school, which would include all of the salaries for those specific teachers, the specific administrators, the specific maintenance and operations staff. And then we have this unallocated layer, if you will. So you're seeing the unallocated layer for fiscal year 14 was $3,166 per student. That's included in this per student expenditure for Accident, for Broadford, for Crellin, for all the schools. That is included. Because it is a cost of doing business. This was simply to give you the first go-round of this data because it is so rich. We can drill down to pretty much anywhere you want to go from here. I worked very closely with Rich, with Mr. Kozlowski, to build it so that if you have questions, we can expand the column. We can go right in there. But this is a very high level summary.
So the reason why per pupil expenditures is valuable is when you lay the graph of the enrollment decline with our expenditures, we can place that in the proper context. Sometimes you hear the rhetoric out there that says we've dropped 1,500 students and nothing changed.
Right.
Plenty has changed.
Right.
The chart here of staff summaries, we've gone from 730 to 594 staff. We've closed buildings. We've decreased programs. So it's just one marker. But you should, in general, if you're right sizing, is that term and if we're in a stable place, that number should stay fairly consistent on our per pupil expenditure as we make costs that align with decreased enrollment. So I do think it's important to drill down, and I think we have a lot of kind of drilling down to in various places. We try to understand the growth of expenditures over time as we do this planning process. But the first graph of enrollment decline is really important to show historically, but it gets all the press because when it's shown alone, again, it can be taken out of context if people outside in the community don't get to see how aggressively the boards have been in recent times to get down to $48 million budget.
Correct.
And then we have to figure out as a board what's that reasonable rate per student and what we're doing. But I guess that's what I want to say.
Well, one other point that I'd like to mention about the summary that you received is that the summary enrollment numbers include pre-K. Because while in FY 14 through 17 we did not receive funding for pre-K students, other than restricted funding, we did educate them. They were in our school system. So that's why you can't just add the state's foundation rate and the maintenance of effort rate and get the revenue per student.
And you'll see a little bit later how some changes to pre-K legislation have actually helped our revenue. You can have that coming up later. Any other questions?
On that graph, when you're saying high school students cost the most to educate, do you mean because their curriculum costs more? Can you get a little bit more into that?
Well,
I've never heard that statement before, so I'm asking.
I'm sorry?
I've never heard that statement, that high school kids cost more to educate. I never heard that at the board meeting.
Mr. Edwards, would you like to explain that?
Well, I don't know if I can necessarily speak to the cost of elementary school, but one thing you have in high school that you have a lot of, or what we call consumables. So you're buying chemicals for chemistry class. Typically, they're not cheap. You've got a lot of consumables in your CT when you start buying lumber and aluminum and steel and welding rods and so on and so forth. One machine in the CTE class can cost, I think last year we spent $42,000 on one machine. So that, when you factor in expenses per student, that factors in. Generally, you've got larger schools with more kids. When you make textbook acquisitions, you're buying hundreds at a time instead of maybe 20s, depending on the size of the elementary school. Again, I'm not one, I can't speak to elementary, I don't deal with elementary, but the high schools, there's a lot of expense, consumables, number of students. So you could say curriculum, number of students, that type of thing.
Another piece that falls into this is the transportation for athletics. Hits.
Huge.
You know, that hits.
Extracurriculars would be another big piece, band, t-shirt.
Right. And we all agree that that's the opportunity that high school students should be enjoying.
And it's a specialization of, the biggest thing is the specialization of the curriculum that requires more staff, that we have some classes that are smaller classes as opposed to not offering specialized opportunities and one person teaches the whole curriculum.
If we've had 8 or 10 students that want an AP class, for instance, we've offered that. So we don't have many elementary classrooms that have 8 to 10. So it is more that specialization and that certification.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a little bit of more present data for you. And the first chart this evening is a breakdown by grade level. Now this is current. This is a breakdown of current homeschool enrollment by grade level. Currently 311 students. Now, we did have another chart that we wanted to show you that, again, was a little bit too busy to include in a slide. It's this one that includes non-public school choice. Because we started talking about, and again, we can certainly get you more information if you need it, but we started talking about, well, what does 311 mean for a school system our size? We can certainly determine a percentage, but how does that compare to other school systems? And when we started really looking at it, we don't have anything else to really offer aside from homeschool. We don't really have any private school students, or we have a few others that you'll see here. But when you really start looking at our numbers of homeschool children, percentage-wise, it's not great, but we don't have any students in private schools, and the state average runs about 6.94%. We have 2.5% in a church exempt school, and the state average runs about 4.85%. So while we do have larger homeschool numbers than I would like to see, I tell people all the time that, I have strong faith in Garrett County schools, and I think when you see our SWOT analysis, you'll see that our community does as well. For whatever reason, we do have parents that wish to homeschool their children. But we don't have many other options for parents, and I think we're running, comparatively not so bad, compared to other systems. So we wanted to include this chart for you as well.
So I guess it's how you read the data. Like for me, that's 7.98% is outside the norm. And I know what you're saying, but we're not, it's outside
Absolutely.
the average of what we see. And I think as we think about opportunities, we should be setting targets that we're trying to achieve. I mean, we should say that 4.5% or 4% or whatever is where we want to be in 10 years. And that's the type of language. I know it's a few students, but when Allison starts multiplying them by the state numbers, it adds up quickly. And that's the type of thing I think in the plan long term that we say, that's something that's out of whack. For different reasons, maybe we can't do anything, but it's the data suggests that we're not normative in homeschool percentage, and it's something we should try to attack with a target number.
Right. And just a reminder, you're absolutely right. We have been looking at this for several years, and one of the things that we have done just in the last recent couple of years, each principal took some time to reach out to homeschool families, invite them in for an open house, meet with the homeschool families. When I was doing my community dialogue, a couple of people said, have you thought, about ways of reaching out to homeschool families? Absolutely would like to continue that and do more of that. So it has been a concern. We just included this just as a additional piece of data for you.
Are the church exempt, the students that don't go beyond the 8th grade? What was church exempt?
No. Dr. Lauber.
Those are schools that are affiliated with the church. So where private schools and non-public schools have to be approved by MSDE. If there's a school affiliated with the church, they have to register but not be approved by MSDE. So they're exempt from MSDE approval.
I guess I'm startled we had that many. I just didn't know that.
We have, I
that many.
believe, 4 schools in the county that are church exempt. There's 2 Amish Mennonite,
Seventh-day Adventist.
Yeah, I know about that.
well, Montessori.
That wouldn't be church exempt.
Yeah, obviously, like what Nate said, those are numbers that could bring in millions of dollars, not thousands, but millions. That we really need to try to work on.
Okay, just some brief information, a couple of slides about facilities. Our average age on our buildings is 47 years. Our oldest building is 65 years old. Our youngest is 19. On average for the school system, we're at about 75% capacity. And in checking with Mr. Swift, we estimate about $36 million in deferred maintenance costs that he has recommended that have been deferred. If you look at the next slide, I know the board has asked for these numbers when it's related to facilities. This is each school and the debt as of 2018, 2019, and 2020. You can see some schools, obviously are higher than others. Some schools have reduced more rapidly. We get these numbers from the State Department.
Yes. This is not debt that we owe anyone.
Right.
We just need to make sure that everyone understands that. This is bond debt that the state had taken bonds to do state school construction. So it's a promise to the state that we will use the building for the next 15 years for the useful life of the construction. So as soon as the project is complete, the time starts ticking, and 15 years after, that's when it rolls completely off. So we wanted to provide here a rolling picture for you. However, as Mr. Swift has shared with you all, that we are fortunate enough to receive QZAB and Aging School funds that will add to it. So this chart doesn't add any of the projects that we've secured because we haven't completed them yet. But if we were in a static environment and there was no progress being done to any of these buildings, this is the debt that we're looking at.
What happens if one of those schools would be closed that has that debt? What happens? What happens next?
Well, there can be several different things that happen. The county commissioners could have to fund that debt to the state. That's an option. Another option is that the building would be used in another capacity by the school system. Carroll County is in the works of moving their central office to one of their closed buildings because there was debt on that building when they closed it. So, certainly it depends on the situation, and it also depends on how closely we can work with our local leaders as well as our state leaders to figure out a solution. But I think the takeaway from this for the board is that rest assured the cabinet team is well aware and in discussion with the state of what our debt truly looks like on all of our buildings.
That's good. I don't think that was in the past with Dennett Road. It wasn't mentioned until after the fact, I remember, when it was closed.
I'm sorry, Allison, go ahead.
I was just going to add that this also doesn't include any future Southern Middle School projects.
Exactly.
Any upcoming projects that we may or may not complete at Southern Middle are not included in these numbers for 1920.
Can I just make a comment? Unless there's something else on the debt. If you have something else on the debt, go ahead. I wanted to talk
Well, I
about
just
the
wanted to
previous
point
slide.
out that there's zero debt on Dennett Road. So all of that debt has matured. This building.
But when the school, right, at the current time.
Because it stayed a school, and we kept the kids, Head Start kids in there. As long as you're
Had to
using it as
utilize
a school
a
facility.
percentage by children until the time I remember.
Yeah.
But the debt is extinguished.
It is
at this
now.
point.
That is
So
correct.
I just wanted to
Yes,
make
you
sure
are
because
correct.
we only listed the schools that our students are currently utilizing.
Right.
The other important information takeaway that isn't listed here is that this building is through a lease agreement with the county commissioners. So I would suggest that as part of our strategic planning moving forward, that we would bring Mr. Hoover in to review that document and see what our options are with that. And then we also have agreements with Community Action, with Head Start in several of our buildings. And all of those agreements have staggered maturity dates, and they have very specific fallout clauses. So it's important that as we're talking about our facilities, we also are aware of our legal obligations with these agreements.
That's a good point. And anytime we can include Dennett Road in the analysis, even if students aren't in there, would be helpful to remind us that it's still there, like in the facility study. I know it's in a separate facilities plan. It's in a separate place. I wanted to go back to the facilities plan, just as in the facilities slide, about the $36 million in deferred maintenance. And as we're looking for kind of data that's helpful for us in the planning process, just again, how we kind of publicly how we consume this. We just did the facilities plan. There's a lot of stuff that's good there, right? We look across our chart, good. We're taking care of most of the stuff. And then, deferred maintenance is all the requests. There's a lot of stuff that's in that request. There's tracks that we may need or may not need, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes into a deferred maintenance plan. So some of that's correct, but I think just speaking for me, what I need kind of closer kind of building specific, some different type of rubric just in deferred maintenance driven by what we've asked for. I think I'm really looking for what are serious kind of structural issues that need, not just structural, but I mean serious things that are going to go to good to poor or whatever it is over the next 10 years. That's what we really that's the helpful kind of data for us to look at these buildings and get an understanding of what the investment. I know that some of that's in the facilities plan of like when big projects are coming, but that's kind of a more useful number than the deferred maintenance 36 million because it's all requests. Everybody puts everything in because they want to try to get something. So of course that number's big.
And you're right, this is just an overview.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
an overview. And since we did go back to this slide, just want to make sure to, we have been many times over been recognized by the state by the maintenance of our buildings. And the fact that we do, our average age of 47 years, is very good.
So let's talk about capacity too, and remind us why the capacity percentage is an important number. Part one.
Well, there are two parts that I see as an important indicator. The first one is that money is tied to that state-rated capacity. When we go to request state funds for any large renovation of any of our schools, that's the first thing they ask us when we're sitting there and we're reviewing the project. So if you go to them with the capacity rate at 64%, they're going to say, you need a different plan. Like, this isn't going to work. So you get a much lower rate. It falls lower on the totem pole in terms of the state, throughout the state, as well as how much funding you do receive for the project. So that's the first point. The second point is that when the cabinet has been discussing what we believe should be looked at as a strategic plan, goal number 4 is to be good stewards of the taxpayer fund. And with that, we really are genuine in wanting to shift what the pie of our expenditures looks like. We want to increase the instruction portion and make the support services and everything else more efficient. So as we increase the capacity, those buildings are more efficient. We're operating the building no matter what. Unless we do something drastic at that building, say close off a portion of it, or like what we have done in certain cases where community action is using it, or we have a daycare using portions of it.
Right.
But we're still maintaining that building, and any monetary portion that we're getting is very minimal.
Right.
So if the building's open, it's more efficient to have the seats full.
So the definition of efficient there is support staff, support services, all the other costs, all the energy costs, everything that you put in. If you put more students, if you pack more students into a school, get it 100%, you don't have to expend energy resources in this school over here if you close it. Or you don't have to provide a nurse over here because you close it. Right. So this is, and then the balance for us, because that's a totally accurate analysis, right? So the more students you can put in one building, the lower the overhead or fixed cost type of thing. Now, then we have to kind of consider all the other values that are in addition to efficiency. As you all know, we have to look at the academic impact and does that change make sense for transportation and all those other things. I just want to, and I've made this point before, and you mentioned, I don't know if drastic. I mean, other community uses that make sense, or other doing uses for other purposes, again, is something to look at. I herald from down in Friendsville, and as I've said on many occasions when I go through Friendsville, and I know its capacity now is in the higher 60 percentages, just go for a tour into the classrooms and see how full the classrooms look. And then try to imagine at full capacity, right? The classrooms are full. We're looking at like 20 or so per student ratio, which makes sense for faculty, student, a good faculty-student ratio for education. So, these are the things we have to kind of wrestle with. It's no doubt that you can gain some of those efficiencies in making those choices, and we have to balance those efficiencies with other considerations as well.
Okay. One of the, as we met back in October, one of the values that the board shared was the value on high academic achievement, of course. So we've included here it's a 15-year history of our assessment results. You'll see a general upward trend, but again, this slide is very difficult to see from your vantage point, but you have it in front of you. You'll see I don't have but the dark lines are, when we've moved from an MSA, HSA to a PARC or to a MESA, so you can't really compare those, but certainly I'm not going to delve into this greatly, but it's here for your review, certainly. Then the next slide is a 9-year history of our bridge plans. And of course, students, if they don't meet a minimum score on their high school assessments or PARC, have to complete bridge plans. And we do score the bridge plans in the evening. There is a budget implication on bridge plans. I know the state board is very interested in researching bridge plans as well. But you'll see some years it goes up, and then as students prepare better for the tests, it can go down. Then it, usually, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Morris, when we move to a new assessment, it goes up again and then tends to go down. I think what the state board is looking at here on bridge plans, there seems to be, like Dr. Sorber said, when you look at anything in isolation, I think there's some indication from the state board that it might be an easier pathway for students to graduate, and I think Mr. Morris, having spent a great deal of time grading them and scoring them with teachers, would assure us that that's probably not the case. They are very in-depth projects. Sometimes students have to complete 3 or 4 more projects to graduate, but he's done an excellent job in ensuring that we have scores there. But like I said on this slide, there is a budget implication for our bridge plans. Okay, so on the next slide, the next couple of slides are from Dr. Wildeston, our HR department. And I think, Dr. Sorber, you mentioned this earlier in our discussion. This is a staff summary over the last 10 years. The dark blue line that you see at the top is the total, and then you'll see the yellow is others, and instructional assistants, the orange is teachers, and the light blue is administrators. But the box in the corner is also very important. The variance over the last 10 years, a loss of 10 in administration, 75 in teachers, 14 instructional assistants, 28.5 what's considered other, and then 127.5 staff members lost over the last 10 years.
Would other be like custodians, food service, all that?
Also, for our planning and strategic planning purposes, we do look at years of service. Now, this is employees, and you'll see that we do have several employees that have 31 to 45 years, 35. 46, 47. employees that have more than 30 years of experience, but you'll also see that many of our people have 0 to 5. So again, this helps us with planning and budgeting in areas that we will need teachers moving forward. But this again was just another data point that we thought we would share. I believe it came out of your committee was a request, Mr. Wozlowski, correct? Okay, our next Ms. Rinker, we didn't have public. You wanted
Yeah,
to stop.
actually, Jane already looked and she came back and we didn't have any public comment and things. Yes.
So our next slide is the Garrett County Healthcare Plan. And I want to kind of preface this by saying this is not our cost per employee. I'm actually going to turn it over to you to explain it just a little bit in a little bit more detail as far as what we are looking at here.
Okay. What this chart is indicating is the expenditures that came out of the trust, that were paid out of the trust for the experience or the actual claims. So what this is showing is that we're having an increase in the cost of the benefit, which I think is not a surprise to anyone. Mr. Marchini at CBiz was helpful enough to work with Dr. Wilderson to supply this data for us. The takeaway, because CBiz is one of our partners, and we work with them to help us along to understand these issues, and Mr. Marchini indicated that while the trend is increasing, and it's increasing about 6.4%, that's within line of the industry average. However, the part that is different than the industry average is that while most institutions or most entities that are offering a healthcare benefit, their costs have increased, they've also decreased what the benefit will cover. Our benefit, for all substantial purposes, has remained very stable for our employees. So you can see that as the cost increased, we get out to the 15, 16, 16, 17 year. Those are the years that the trust ran at a deficit. So we had been paying in enough to pay to pay for that increase, and now we're at that tipping point where this becomes a discussion for the strategic plan. So.
Okay, so the next slide, we start sharing with you some of the themes that we, through the cabinet and through the two chairs of our committees that we've, through our analysis of our SWOT, our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We actually did 3 different ways of data collection. At the last meeting, I shared with you that we started with our administrators and supervisors group. Then we had an online survey, and then I went out to every building and met with anyone that wanted to come and talk to me. And I've pulled up themes here. You'll see as we're moving forward, we do plan to share more of the raw data, but right now it was, we wanted to leave the survey open as long as possible. So we have themes for you tonight, but we'll certainly share more information with you as we move through this process. So if you look, the first group is the administrators and supervisors. And again, indicating that some of our strengths, and you will see this theme throughout, and I want to make sure that I articulate that was absolutely a theme for the online survey, for the public dialogue sessions, and for our administrators, that we have an exceptional workforce of our highly qualified and skilled staff. People reported to me, teachers, administrators, central office personnel, that our people are definitely a strength for us. Our A&S group also wanted to indicate, like Mrs. Schweitzer just said, we have an excellent healthcare and benefit package for our employees. As we talked earlier, we continue to work on that student-to-device ratio. I've shared academic achievement scores with you, and we have tremendous community support. And I think everyone in this room would share in those strengths. Weaknesses, they shared that, we continue to see shortages in maintenance and central office, people wearing very many hats, feeling that that's the way we've always done it, as a weakness, vehicle limitations, building, inequities as far as maybe capacities or, some buildings have that others do not, are out of area, and we've talked about that as a board on several occasions, and internal and external communication.
What do you mean about vehicle limitations?
I was learning that too.
Well,
Does everybody want a car?
I think a lot of it has to do with the rental program.
Yeah, it was.
Driving from, we hear a lot, have to rent a car in the south. If you have a meeting to go, you gotta come down and get it. So I think we're trying to address that a little bit, some of the things we're doing.
Okay, opportunities, right sizing either the classrooms or the buildings. Either build a relationship or enhance our relationship with the Board of Public Works and the governor for increased support and funding. And I think Ms. Schweitzer mentioned that earlier as well. And then we have an opportunity, as Dr. Sorber said, to continue to collaborate with community resources to maybe look at some ways that we can use our buildings and our people more efficiently. The A&S group identified threats as declining enrollment and the declining funding, increased costs, our aging schools, class sizes have increased, and our aging community, nobody quote me on that, I'm sharing what the A&S group said, but people having less children, people, that stay in our community, often their families move away and come back later, I think is what they meant. So if you look at the online, the first question that we asked was to have people identify themselves and which stakeholder group that they represented by filling in the survey, whether they were staff. I will say that I spoke to the Garrett County Public Schools retired personnel. We actually mailed that. They could take it online, but we actually mailed them a survey if they wanted to take it paper and pencil, and they could mail it back in, and we've included their results as well. Parents, business members, community, elected officials, students, and alumni. Oh, sorry. Click. Sorry. And then you'll also see we asked them which region they identified with, and you'll see 38% responded from the northern end of the county and 62% from the southern end.
What was the two parent of? Parent of?
It was a current student or a graduate student.
Okay, first one's a current student.
I
would imagine.
And there was parts of the survey that was just a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 response, just for us to get a general feel. And you can see the number of responses, 184. Curriculum instruction received mostly 4s and 5s. Extracurricular, again, mostly 4s and 5s.
You can go to the next slide.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, keep reminding me. And then our administrators, a little bit more in 3s and 4s, and some 5s, but that could include, that wasn't just principals in that particular question. Maintenance and facilities, safety and security, again, 4s and 5s. Our business services, 4s and 5s, and then like our directors, supervisors, and managers, again, a little bit more in our 3s and 4s than in 5s. But very pleased to see very little 1s and 1s and 2s in this. I will say that I think 184 responses is really good. We publicized it, like I said, when I would speak to community groups or like the retired school personnel. We had it on our website. We put it on Twitter and Facebook. Correct, Mr. Morris. We also, I spoke with the chamber. Remember, they asked us if they were doing one. I believe they represented many community groups, but I think they only had about 14 or 15 responses that actually represented those groups. So I want to say I think 184 is an excellent response rate. Then we picked out certain words that we didn't do this for everything, but we definitely did it for strengths. And again, I want to make sure that I share, how many people indicated that a strength for us was our teacher, our students, our staff, our schools, our dedicated support staff, our technology staff. This is just a word cloud. We did it several different ways. I want to thank Mr. Gank. We just took this to pull out what some of the words were that people were reporting to us in strengths. But I also have it in the next slide as well. Great staff, again, administration, smaller class sizes. Then I think that might it says smaller class sizes than larger schools. Some may have just reported that. Extracurricular athletics, clean and well-managed facilities, great community involvement, our STEM resources, including our robotics programs. Our school system has ranked very high within the state over a number of years, and we have an excellent graduation rate. Again, I picked out themes for weaknesses. Again, limited funding for programs and initiatives, lack of necessary staff, assistants, teachers, mental health specialists, not enough educational programs, and we're really looking at how we can meet our, I remember one time going to a training where the gentleman said we did really well with the middle. We need to look at how we're educating our gifted and talented, our AP students, and our special education students. So that came out in the SWOT analysis. Opportunities and threats. This is the online again. Opportunities, more partnerships. Again, we saw that with the A&S group. More participation in community events. And more program offerings. We have really decreased foreign language over the last few years. They're telling us that's something through this plan that we need to look at. Maybe we can enhance again. And then threats, aging facilities, the drug and opioid crisis that I mentioned in this meeting many times, further declining enrollment, not enough discipline due to state regulations. I'm not sure what not enough means, but we really have had to change our discipline policies. And then, of course, the threat of closing schools is always there. And then finally, I did meet with every single school. The numbers aren't going to be exactly correct because there were a couple of people that came to more than one session. There was one person that came to 3. There was one person that came to Krellen during the day and then came to Southern Middle that evening. So, I think I had some good participation. You can see on this chart a lot of parents were in attendance. We did have some staff members attend, and then we did have some community members. In Accident, it was just one community member. But you'll see, like in Krellen, we had a mixture. At Swan Meadow, we had a mixture. Now, unfortunately, at Southern High School, nobody attended. And then in some of the schools, like Route 40 in Grantsville, it was just one person. And they were like, "Do you still want to do this?" And I said, "Absolutely." So we had some nice one-on-one dialogue. I wanted to keep saying, "Feel free to share with me, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing it, feel free to do our online survey." So, I feel pretty good about the in-person sessions. And again, every single time I said, "Okay, let's list our strengths," they said, "Great teachers." Small class sizes they looked at as a strength. Again, collaboration with our local resources and that sense of community and community support. They mentioned smaller schools and therefore not as many opportunities in foreign languages and computers. One or two schools did mention a couple of offerings with food service that we might want to look at. And then, as our A&S group said, our out of area policy procedures. Opportunities, more collaboration with businesses, and I think as Mr. Edwards said earlier, we've really done a lot to look at that CTE training, but I know you've got some good things in the hopper for job development. So that's an opportunity for sure. As we stated earlier, possible enrollment of some homeschool children and expanding our pre-K offerings. Threats to the school system, lack of economic development, that declining enrollment again, behavioral issues, increased rigor. We talked tonight about the assessments, the tax dollars, and then aging schools.
On that one, for opportunity pre-K expansion, does that mean the elementary schools that don't have pre-K or ones that already have pre-K?
It could have been both. It probably was both. I know we have expanded, and Ms. Spicer will talk about that when we talk about our budget projections. We have expanded pre-K over the last few years. I remember when I was early childhood director, there were many students that we were not able to offer. Now, every child that would like pre-K, we've been able to offer a pre-K. So we could still further expand that. That's not always in their home school. Maybe we could look at, offering in a home school. But we've moved to a model where people, if they want pre-K, we're able to offer it. So we certainly can do more. Any other questions from the SWOT analysis? Like I said, the online data, is very raw right now, but you'll see in our recommendations for a timeline that we would like to share more information from that SWOT analysis with you. Okay, so then on to the future. You will see on the next slide some projected enrollment numbers. The blue are our numbers, then without pre-K, and then numbers we get from the Maryland Department of Planning. And we've been talking in cabinet, the Maryland, I'm sorry? Oh, I thought somebody said something. The Maryland Department of Planning, we don't feel has been very accurate. Our projected enrollment numbers have been more accurate in Dr. Lauber's planning. So these are projected numbers through 2021. Again, there are years where we're just down slightly. I would love to have one of those years like we saw that goes up. We're not projecting that moving forward. Anything we want to add?
There is an expanded chart in the board docs that indicates the breakdown, the northern end versus the southern end, and then the totals at the bottom. When you get out 2 or 3 years, it obviously gets a little bit more gray. And so for 1 through 8, we rolled the exact grade level forward. So that's assuming no one leaves, nobody comes. For 9, 10, 11, and 12, we did take a regression analysis and remove some of those students. So there is, it's not an exact roll forward.
Averages to be used.
We did an average, and
7% enrollment, 8%.
over 4 years, so then it's divided by 4 per year. So that's for secondary. For the pre-K and K, for kindergarten, we took a 5-year average of what the class sizes for those schools have been. Regardless of any out-of-area data, we just looked at exactly the numbers that were enrolled at those schools. And then for pre-K, we basically did the same thing. There were a couple outliers that we had to manually adjust. Swan Meadow had a very large class It had never happened before, and it skewed the average. But we are also assuming that our pre-K classes will be full. That we want them to be at 20. So. It is good to mention that while we don't fully agree with the Maryland Department of Planning projections, over the long haul, we do run about 20 to 30 off of what they project. So in terms of an overall variance or error, like when you're looking at a polling, I can't think of the word, but so we're within the
Margin of error.
The margin of error, exactly. And we did, Mr. Wazlowski and also Dr. Lauber, we met extensively, and we poured over birth data, and we poured trying to make any sense of all of the data that we have, and really this is the best projection that we can make as of December 12th, 2017.
Is 2021 as far out as the state makes a projection?
No, the Maryland Department of Planning makes 20 years.
2026 right now.
2026. It's about a 10-year projection.
And then every year they update it. But their update is based off of the prior year, so it's really kind of a 2-year lag.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at those projections versus what we think our projections are,
Sure.
when you get out there, that's 180, 170 city difference. And that's
Well, they're calculating in our aggressive downward slope, right? Is that what? I mean, as they're looking back at historic data, is that what's?
I've actually talked to them on the phone, Dr. Liver and I have talked with them, because every year we have to, Dr. Liver submits data, and we have to be within, is it 10% of a margin? We have to agree within 10% with their numbers, or else we can't, what it is, I don't remember what it is. So anyway, we have to talk to them on the phone every other year to say we don't agree. And then they explain to us that it's not just the birth rates and it's not just the traditional steep decline, but it's the economic indicators of our area. When the Marcellus Shale legislation was huge, that was a big deal. They were saying that could change your projections. Those are the things so. They look at the economic indicator, the economic impact of our large employers. The fact that Garrett Regional Medical Center changed from Garrett Memorial Hospital, that changed their numbers. So it's not just one.
And their modeling is always going to be off because Baltimore City has a lot more industry. You change one industry in Garrett County, it sways the number. So because of our size too, I get that we're difficult to model both for you all and for them. Could you explain the regression analysis you ran for the high schools on those assumptions? What did that work out to, and your percentage drop? You said students were removed.
It was 8% at Southern.
It was 8% at Southern and 6.7, I think, at Northern.
You take that on you were basing that on the number who entered as ninth graders versus the number that graduated as the seniors.
We took 5 years of entering ninth graders and then the number that graduated.
Right. Graduation rate basically is what you're using.
Exactly.
That's the okay.
And then we divided it evenly as if they were all leaving evenly, not. So there are a lot of assumptions, but.
This one I have 8th grade.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. I did forget that. We traditionally only have 1 or 0 students that choose to pursue higher education beyond the Swan Meadow program. So I think this year we had 1. And so we eliminated those 8th grade numbers when we rolled into 9th grade. And if they do decide to stay and pursue their education, that will be added, but we didn't want to assume anything there.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, at the end of the day, we got to come up with whatever our best model is. we have to agree to what assumptions that we all can live with, and we have to live with some numbers. But
In these figures, Maryland Department of Planning does not include pre-K. So that's part of that difference in their numbers.
Right.
All right. Estimated unrestricted revenue.
would you characterize it as leveling off? Is that an unfair public characterization, or are we still in a period of long-term declining enrollment?
I think we would be premature to completely say it's leveled off based on history, like you said. I think there could be a year or two where we go up.
I think we are really tied at this moment in time into what happens economically in our county. I think that's going to be the driving force, quite frankly, because there have to be jobs generated.
Yeah, and I think you just said it, Dr. Sorber, that if we had something that were to come in, we would hopefully see some families move in.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But I also believe that our numbers were showing that leveling point you indicated when we applied the high school thing.
Right.
Back then.
Because if you draw the slope line, I've said this before,
Yes.
on the 5 points, right? It's different than when you go.
Yes.
Obviously, when you go further back. It's both in both public dialogue and thinking about it as we move forward. We want to. That's important to kind of get a sense of. There's got to be a new normal, right? It's not going to zero, as I've said. There's got to be a new normal, so we have to kind of also get a sense of where the slope line is and what we're kind of thinking about if we're looking 8 years out, which I know we're not going to have those numbers, but kind of get our mind around. Because
looking at the number at births, that's still declining each year.
At a decreased rate, Dr. Laver.
It's just steadily declining.
Right, the birth rate, if you look on it on a chart, it goes like this. Like,
You get a little bumps up,
right,
and it drops
and
farther.
then it goes down.
But honestly, say it's kind of hard to determine the birth rate because not everybody that has babies in Garrett County deliver in Garrett County. Like some go Cumberland, Morgantown, wherever, or some people that deliver in Garrett County aren't actually from Garrett County. So that's kind of hard
Vice
to.
versa, some in Preston County.
Right, it's
have-
not
Right.
right.
And that's why we didn't even use it
Right,
to come up
do
with
not
the
use it at
kindergarten
all.
or the pre-K because we could not tie any correlation.
Other than you do have that pattern of continual decline.
I mean, if you look at Head Start, not all kids are in Head Start or early childhood. Some of them are still at home with their parents, so or family daycare.
But I will say, over the years of doing budget presentations or listening to budget presentations, what we projected has been pretty close. This year, I think we were up a little bit, and I'd love to see us project to be up, to continue to be up. I'm not sure I can answer.
No, you're fine. We're doing a strategic plan 8 years out. We have to come up with an agreement of how many students we think are going to be in that system in 8 years out. So we have to, to plan, we have to have some sort of common agreement on that. Thank you for your work on that.
Okay, so estimated unrestricted revenue. The chart here, I've laid down in the first column the 2018 approved revenue, so that the board has a point of reference. Then we move over to the estimates for 2019, 2020, and 2021. At the time that this was sent to you, there are still important pieces of information that I've not received from the state, nor has any other director of finance. Being the state enrollments, we haven't received any indications of changes in wealth that, as you all know, impacts our formula for funding, as well as we don't know if there will be a maintenance of effort escalator. That means that the county would be required by law to increase their per pupil maintenance of effort expenditure with us. So those are pieces of information I do not have at this time. But we will certainly go through this. So for 2019, we are projecting a decline of $314,000 in revenue. And fortunately, it's not larger, and that is in large part due to House Bill 684, which through legislation, there became a formula to fund pre-K. So, as you'll recall from the budget presentation for FY 2018, we were at 50% of the per pupil foundation amount for universal pre-K. And then as we go through the years, next year will be 75%. So we're looking at 75% here in 2019, and then we're at 100% of the foundation rate per pupil for pre-K students in 2020 and 2021. So at that point, it does make expanding pre-K opportunities for our students much more affordable if we are able to allocate the resources appropriately. One of the issues that we are seeing, and I worked very closely with Ms. Raybold and also Mr. Germain, is the fact that our special education numbers are declining, and there is an additional per pupil allocation for special education, as well as our free and reduced meal student population is declining. So that affects our compensatory formula from the state. And so luckily
May I interrupt?
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do they put that decline of the farm students on the fact that you're not filling out the forms?
they don't care about the forms.
No, I'm saying-
Like they just, they have to have the form, and that's just the way it is. Like I don't think that, like they've done everything they can to get the students to fill out.
No, I guess what I'm saying, maybe I phrased it wrong. Our farms numbers are declining, and I think the reason they're declining is because we're not following through with the forms as families. Not blaming anybody for not doing it, but it doesn't make sense to me that we're a richer community, that we don't need free reduced meals. We're just not asking for them.
But
Not us,
also had-
not us, the parents.
Us as parents.
Right.
Yeah, the families.
Well, and the administrators do a very good job of trying to get these
Oh, I know.
funds collected. They really do. But when you get into high school, very rarely do any of
You
them.
will see that a lot of the kids that are identified as farm students in elementary and middle school miraculously are no longer farm students
Sure.
in high school. And that's exactly attributable, 95% of it, to what you just mentioned.
And we actually do have a bubble on that 8th to 9th grade class. And we do have a very large amount of decline in farms this year. So,
See, I guess the thing, it makes it look like that we're richer than we are
Yes, it
on
does.
paper. Look, you got a very small farms group. This county can't be that poor. It's got to be really rich. Now, maybe every county has the same problem. I don't know. But I do know you're right. At Southern High School, it was the only time we ever got a lot of them to do it was when we got QSAV monies tied to it. And then everybody ran to the office to do
We've
it.
tried mailing them, we've tried, like Ms. Proudfoot said, we've tried calling families. I said, used to be a different color ticket, now they just punch in their number.
Yeah.
We've tried, there's been a whole host of things to try and get that, get those applications. You could return them here, you could be in, many, like kids, high school kids didn't have to return them to their home school. They could return them here or mail them back in, so they didn't have to be seen with a form or whatever. But it's, so far we've been unsuccessful with really getting, but a decline in overall enrollment is going to mean a decline in our number of forms returned.
Sure.
So then the final point that I would like to make on this slide is that there is no carryover amount included in this revenue. As you know, we do have, there are funds set aside from the carryover from previous years for subsequent years' budgets, but we wanted to give a true representation of what our flush revenues were to look like.
So can I say something about this slide too? I know we're going to get in the expenditure side, but as I said previously, I think in our planning purposes, part of the impetus was we needed to do this. First of all, we needed to do this as a board, but go through this planning process. But part of it was the county commissioners wanting to see a plan as part of the capital improvement before they, capital improvement approval process. Okay. So I think we should model our plan not just with maintenance of effort. We're holding it at maintenance of effort now, right? That we're assuming that the county commissioners are not going to increase as we have costs of the 1.5% that you've applied, right? That they're not going to apply a 1.5%. But I think we should model when we're thinking about our plan, we're looking at our long-term projections, we should give the commissioners an opportunity to see what a mixture of cost cutting and investment from the commissioners at a reasonable cost of living, or that one, whatever that percentage is, increase to help lighten the blow of increased cost. And I know we do the same thing at the state level, and you're going to give us other data. But I think that's important as part of the discussion as we look at this. We approach this as a partnership. I don't think the county commissioners said that they were against maintenance or only maintenance of effort moving forward always. So I think we should think about how to model that as part of our discussions to start approaching it as a partnership as we think about controlling costs and getting cost adjustment revenue.
Well, and another piece of information to go along with that is that there are other avenues other than just the maintenance of effort per pupil allocation that the county can assist the Board of Education with. There's the one-time expenditure. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, $428,000 for textbooks and to kick off the Rachel's Challenge program. And that didn't factor into maintenance of effort for the following year. However, it did help us with a one-time expenditure. Yes,
we can't speak for the commissioners, but I think if we should be approaching it as a partnership and give them a sense of what increased investment over time could do to lighten some of the impacts of our budget adjustment to stagnant or declining.
Yeah. And if you'll recall, last year they were forced to increase through the escalator 2.4%. So they did have to increase beyond the COLA that I'm suggesting because they were not keeping pace with the other 24 counties or cities. So there's the legislation side that forces them to come along too, if they don't already do it.
Right.
So.
Any other questions on the
Will there be a, as soon as you turn the page, will there be a, how are we going to handle kind of state policy, talk about impossible things in our planning process? Have you all had discussions about, I know you always tell us during budget time, we heard about some opportunities. Have you given some thought about how you're going to assess the political the political
We
winds.
assess it all the time.
But as far for the planning process, how you will help us kind of sense where we're going and how we should.
Well, you're right, we've always kind of presented that in conjunction with the budget or in conjunction with like the legislative breakfast, from last week. Each one of these people in the room are constantly looking at, what's coming in legislation or unfunded mandates or anything that's coming our way so that we can continually make you aware of it.
Yeah.
So, anything that we know that's coming, we can certainly, as you look at our timeline or our suggestions for, upcoming plans. And that's why I kind of said that at the beginning. I don't look at this as a plan that we're going to be finished and submitted in 8 years from now, expect that we would have done it all. We will continually have to reassess it as each budget year comes along and as each new piece of legislation or opportunity also comes along.
Right. I mean, so and I get that. I mean, so a big one is the Kerwin Commission, right? That I know sometimes I hear nothing good's coming out of it. Sometimes I hear maybe there'll be some things. There's a little understanding of. So I mean that nobody wants to do really drastic things on our expense. I mean, we want to control our expenditures and find a place, but we don't want to do something drastic and then see the Kerwin Commission has recognized some of the unique challenges in a rural county. So does that make sense?
And that's an absolute perfect example because when they first started on deciding on a Kerwin Commission or however, I don't know how many years ago that was, but many years ago. And at that time, board members said, well, we don't want to do anything too drastic because it might come. And how long has that been in process? And then it's another year. And that Kerwin Commission is going much more away from a funding formula, which is what we thought it was going to be at the beginning, to more of a recommendations for equity and what good education looks like. So I would think we plan forward, keeping that in the back of our mind, but not necessarily expecting it to make major changes to the way that we're funded, or that there will be anything like Ms. Schweitzer said. We are probably more likely to get something with the pre-K legislation, something that is smaller here or there than that report is really going to have a huge impact on Garrett County. I don't think that it will.
I mean, I think that, again, for context, in the plan, I think that's important that we need to specify for the community and say, here is our assessment of the headwinds or whatever at the state level.
Right.
This is what we're agreeing to of where we think things are going over the next 8 years. We're operating with that assumption in the political context.
Unless the equity funding, it really benefits some of the larger districts, I don't think it's going to really benefit Garrett County, but it could. And certainly I think that, and along with many other things that we'll talk a little bit when we look at what we've determined as some things for consideration. Certainly what's happened and pre-K to 2 with some of the legislation there and some of the discipline regulations that we've faced over the last few years. Some of those things impact us greatly. Dr. Lovren and Ms. Rinker asked the question this evening about the diabetic legislation. Some things we can predict and some things we can't predict. But if we need to put a nurse there, we have, and if it's all 12 schools, then we have to put then we'll have to put a nurse there. So I think those are the kinds of things that we always have to keep in the back of our mind that we know are going to have budget implications. Even the bridge plan projects that, if there is some change in what the state board decides, on the way those are scored, we might need 4 or 5 more staff to, every evening to score them. That would have budget implications. So I think all of that fits in here, Dr. Sorber, into what we all keep in mind. Did we answer your question or?
Yeah, no, that's good. I turn it back to you. I mean,
okay. All right, so we'll go to, unfortunately, this one's called budget deficit, so I'll let, we only have a few more to go, so hopefully this one's not too bad.
Okay, so what we see here is I've pulled the revenue, the projected revenue over to align it or to show it against what we believe a rough estimate of our expenditures going forward would be. Now, we've applied a 1.5 COLA increase, and as of October 2017, the Consumer Price Index was showing a 12-month percentage increase much higher than that. Social Security just came out with their increase for 2018, and it was 2%. So while I'm trying to give us a realistic stance on what our goods and services are going to cost, including healthcare, including all of our licenses, refreshing our devices, as well as supporting compensating our staff, we believe that a 1.5% was reasonable. So we're looking at an estimated gap in FY 2019 of just over $1 million. And again, this does not apply any of the $1.8 million in carryover that we have set aside, that you set aside the last board meeting for subsequent years' budgets. So then in 2020, we're looking at 1.9 million, and then in 2021, we're looking at 2.69. So, or 2.7. So, this is kind of the reality check. Will we have a 1.5% increase? It's $730,000 next year. That's completely reasonable. When you look at the amount of goods and services we purchase, the needs of our school system, with the behaviors that we're having, the training that our staff is required to be able to support the needs of these students, as well as the opioid crisis that it's at a federal level at this point. So that's what we're looking at now. So, are there any questions about this modeling?
Yeah, I have like 9, but I don't want to.
We do your first 9.
Yeah, no, I don't have 9. I just, so if you're at home watching this and you see this data and you look at, our fairly stable revenue, right? You see the numbers that you look at, kind of the state support per the amount of students is saying kind of the same. There's the local funding modeling is decreased a little bit, but you're saying, you look at it and you say the fundamentals haven't changed that much in the school system between 2018 and 2021 because the revenues have stayed fairly constant, right? How do we grow? So even if you're not growing, so this is not a story from 18 to 21 of we're losing 30 students and we got to do something. We have a 2 million gap. This is a story of 4 years where we're saying everything stayed exactly the same as it did last year, and we're 2 million in the hole by 2021. So the question is like long term. It's not just like, yeah, we can cut down and whatever. It's that there's no support for, like, if we're growing 1.5% by inflation, right, and we're not getting any additional revenue, if you're not growing, nobody's coming to rescue you on nothing we're doing, right? Inflation, monetary policy, not set by anybody, right? Here, so that's kind of my first just general reaction of how people would see this at home, right? We're not falling behind. We are staying here, and we can't balance because of the 1.5. Okay, that's just my general kind of statement for us to kind of put it in perspective that this is also a problem, how we handle cost of living increases over time. How do we cover that? Where does that revenue come from? Now, if I switch to the expenditure side, I think we all want to see is a plan on a more detailed level, or what are the bigger drivers of that expenditure growth. If we are, the part we know we have to tackle this to some degree in expenditures, right? We can beat the bushes on revenue and make our case, but we have to deal on expenditures. But I think this is where we really kind of need to drill down, which you've already done some of, as we look at healthcare, we look at maintenance, we look at technology and staffing, and that's where we have to, as we're thinking about planning and make some decisions, where we need probably some of the greatest specificity to kind of pull out those costs to say, if we're not getting inflation adjustments, how are we going to tackle expenditures?
But I think also our greatest cost in there is that we can't forecast is going to be our healthcare costs. I mean, those could skyrocket in a couple of years. We just don't know that. We know they're going to go up.
Right.
But to what percentage are they going to go up every year? We'll really skew those numbers.
And coupled with the new GASB standard that forces all governments and municipalities to record their entire liability, we don't know what that's going to do with the state pension. A couple years ago, they transferred some of it to the locals. What kind of legislative impact could come that way because of the GASB change?
Right.
And that the pension is in that fixed cost. That 22% of our spend is that fixed cost. That's healthcare. It's the pension. It's the benefits. It's what makes. According to our SWOT analysis, it makes it a reason why people want to teach here.
Sure.
So we are going to have to carefully review all of that.
I mean, at the same time, we have the $2 million, that we're seeing this projected deficit. We also saw a sheet that at a building level, there was only, I think, 1 or 2 examples where expenditures outran revenue for those buildings. I'm not saying that's the only thing we're going to look at, but I think that's kind of the analysis across the board to say where is there red in various places in long-term trends that at least we should, as a threat we need to tackle. I didn't really have 9.
I was going to say. Not at all.
9 minutes worth.
Any questions over here? Well, okay, so we're coming towards the end. We have 2 more slides. Based on the SWOT analysis and some discussions with cabinet and the 2 chairpersons, we've come up with some strategic issues that we see as needing to go into the plan as we move forward. And I think it goes to a lot of what Dr. Sorber said about continuing, you'll see it there, continuing to keep up with technology demands and offer world-class programs and keep our low student-to-teacher ratios while growing our system in an environment where we have a deficit. But I will say that, and I told the 2 chairs this today, and I now have in the room my director of elementary education as well, and I see one of the single greatest threats to our school system, one of our strategic issues, as the increased behavioral issues at the primary grades. I have my executive director of instruction here as well. If I'm off the mark, please tell me. And here's why. I totally agree with what you said, Mr. Woods, about making, really looking at getting back some of our homeschool population and bringing back in our revenue. And our STARS program is going well. We've had some bumps in the road, and we're really looking at how we can improve that program and how we can improve it in our individual schools as well. But we are seeing behaviors that we cannot predict. It goes right along with what Ms. Schweitzer said about the opioid, that issue, because we can't tie that directly necessarily, but we do know that what the research is telling us, that is what's happening. And we can't predict the behaviors. The behaviors are more extensive than we've seen in the past. It used to be maybe 1 or 2 outliers here or there at an elementary school, and that is not the case now. We are seeing them. I've shared that with the board in the past, but to me, that is one of our single greatest threats. When I met with teachers, that's what the elementary families were telling me. And I think we are working towards that, but 1 or 2 out of area placements would be our cost would be astronomical, and we know that. So we're trying to really work with the students here, but training our teachers, training our instructional assistants to work with children with behavioral needs has a very high cost. But it's one I'm sorry, it takes time. It does take time. It takes time that the other parents do not want to wait because their children are in that classroom too.
Like sit down.
And they don't want to wait to make sure the behavior plan is going to work. They want to see results, and we have to work towards that. So that's why I put that first, because I strongly believe that is an issue.
One thing I wanted to add with that is when we really analyze our workman comp claims, we've seen a drastic spike in student to staff incidents over the last 2 years that has really impacted our workman's comp. With the person, that employee being out of work, which also adds to our workman's comp thing, but also the instruction that's next.
And it's at this primary grade.
Correct.
It is not high school or, it is.
Well, and we need to identify the behaviors and address them now before it becomes an upper level elementary or middle school issue, because that's where we're seeing it right now.
I have a question. I see what you just said, and I thoroughly understand we're having increased behavior issues at primary grades. Mr. Wazlowski, are you seeing an impact also with this, with your school bus drivers on the buses? These students have more behavior issues on the buses also?
Absolutely.
So there might be a time when we might need more assistance on these buses, or...
Yeah, we're already doing that.
Right,
I've been
but
able to move
it's-
around without adding right now, but I'm kind of almost at the end of
what you can do.
I have to start movement and have to start adding. Yeah.
We tease this out in the plan. This is this is a school issue. But as I've said, in so many of these cases, we're on the front line fighting the opioid epidemic by ourselves, right? Not ourselves. I mean, I don't mean ourselves, but we're really in the thick of it, is a better way to say it. And we can't fix it ourselves, right? I mean, we need county partners. There was a good discussion at the legislative breakfast about this. We need funding, to support this. And it's, so, I mean, I think, once again, this is another kind of issue that we put out there that, yes, we have to deal with this, but this is, not opportunity is the right word, but this is where we have to kind of look outward and challenge, work with various partners and get support.
Mrs. DeVore and I were literally on the phone the entire weekend, discussing ways that we can address what we can look at as far as thinking outside the box, addressing it at a certain school. And I said the exact same thing. We know we're not the only ones dealing with this. Where can we learn?
And you said at your superintendent meeting that all the superintendents
absolutely.
were talking about
Well,
statewide.
I think the difference between a rural school system like our own and other school systems is the resource differences are incredible.
Right.
I mean, just incredible difference.
Well, and also because the leadership at the central office wears so many hats, it's not uncommon for Mrs. DeVore, Ms. Baker, Ms. Proudfoot, and myself to all be tied up for 2 hours trying to put out a fire that's concerning a school.
Right.
That hijacks your whole day. Think of the resources that are being devoted to try to solve these
And that's what the principals are telling us, and that's what the teachers are telling us.
Sad part is you're saying it hijacks their day here. I understand that, but think of the students in that classroom.
Oh, I know, and that's what I mean. The escalation
in their mind.
The escalation of what this is causing.
And if you're on the bubble to home teaching,
right,
the bubble just burst.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
It's part of it's a much larger. It's not just behavior while you're dealing with them. It's certainly a larger issue.
Well, that's I think that's the staffing element that we can't even predict over the next 5 years. The number of psychologists or psychiatrists that we may have to employ.
Well, if you think of
We may get the legislation that forces us to do that as well.
If you go down to the last bullet on health and special education services, I think it was last budget session that I talked about. I remember when I shared with Dr. Walker, one of the bills was a mental health provider, a school psychologist in every school with needs with mental health, and he said that's every single one of them, and we would not be able to find them, and we wouldn't be able to pay them.
If you found them, you'd have to pay them.
Exactly. So, I won't read these to you. We certainly would add the homeschool discussion to these strategic issues as well. But, and for instance, I was talking to Mr. Gang today about, the bullet on technology resource demands. We're moving towards a blended learning classroom, and that means an increase in tech devices, but also we still have traditional students and teachers that like a textbook. So we purchase some of those as well, but it's also the infrastructure, it's also the professional development, so you don't just purchase the materials and then the teachers don't use them. It's professional development, it's the site licenses. We have a significant number of contracts that, and those go up by that same COLA every year. So these are some strategic issues based on the SWOT analysis, based on the cabinet meetings that we have identified so far. And you'll see as we go through a timeline that I mentioned last month, that I'd like to propose this evening. This is the last slide. Would really like to have further input after the board has time to digest all of these numbers that we've given you and give you time to ask for anything else you may need. I think Dr. Sorber, you mentioned a couple other data points that you might want for us to provide to you. But I'd like to propose, we have a special meeting on January 30th. I'd like to propose, because everybody's schedule is difficult to get everyone to a meeting, and the earlier meeting in January, I believe, Mr. Paw, you will not be able to be here in person. And we would really like every board member to be here in person for the work session. And at that time, as I presented the Board of Education goals at the beginning, to review and revise those. If there are revisions that you would like to do on the goals to start with, and then start formulating some strategies and address any strategic issues that you see as you digest the data. Then, at the regular board meeting on the 13th, have a public presentation of the strategy options. Then at the regular meeting on March 13th, the strategic plan presented to the board is in draft. Then between March 13th and April 10th, have that draft strategic plan available for public comment. I would certainly be willing to go back out to schools, maybe do another online survey, certainly provide as many opportunities for public comment as we could. And then at the regular board meeting on April 10th, have that as a tentative date for adoption of the plan, and then look at an implementation schedule if you are agreeable to this as a tentative timeline to moving forward. I believe it's based on the guidance document, and certainly keeping in mind the values that you shared with us in October, but also, the steps that you would like to see included as we move forward.
Do you have enough information from us of what additional data? I feel like I was just throwing stuff out. I saw Rich taking notes, but would it be helpful to maybe the board, just to take the week or so and kind of write down what additional data we would like in the
Well, we have another public meeting in January.
Okay.
We have the 9th. I believe is our regular meeting.
January 9th.
So you could present them, we could put it on the agenda for that night. That's just throwing that out there, I'm not married to that. then that would give us plenty of time between the January 9th and the January 30th to get you anything else that you need before the work session.
Yeah, I think, like, when I think of the flow, like, I think when we ultimately are going to identify some of these strategic issues that we're going to tackle, to kind of get, these are good strategic issues, but I mean, like, the things that I think are going to be front and center of the plan, we want to make sure we've looked at some of that data on the front end to kind of identify that. I just don't want to have any waste of time on the 30th meeting. Like, I want,
Me either.
the 30th, you know, we can roll up our sleeves and I think for that to be productive, I think we need to, you know, be talking at least on the 9th about some of these kind of our core strategic issues, have the data around them, what some of those might be. So I think if you need more clarity after this is, you can email and then we can ask for whatever data we.
A lot of times we look for your data, it leads us to something else, and say, oh yeah, I think that would be helpful to them also.
Okay.
So
Right, which I think is what we did tonight,
Yeah.
for sure.
I think the January 30th work session will lead to whether that timeline will be attainable or not. I think we'll know then. Is that unattainable?
So are you asking for an action then just to have January 30th at 1 o'clock, our special session board meeting, and then at that date, then we could just see if these other dates work and make action after that? Is that what? Well, I'm just asking because we just got this before the board meetings, this pack of information. So these dates we never seen ahead of time. So it's kind of hard to make a decision. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
But
And that's why
we didn't have the process beforehand.
Right. But noting that almost everything after that special work session is at a regular board meeting.
Well, and the special session is the budget work session.
Right.
Previously. So we were trying to find dates that were already on your calendar.
Exactly.
That January 30th date changed. That was originally another date. The first time we got it, it was like the 27th.
It was, yes. And then we changed it that evening to the 30th.
Right. Miss Rinker, if I could have just a motion that the 9th would be for any clarifying questions you have back to us, and then the 30th that we could meet at 1 o'clock, and then at the 30th iron out the rest of the timeline, then I think that would be appreciated by my team, and I think that we could work with that.
Motion.
I'll make the motion that we accept that.
That we accept January 9th for clarifications or questions, and that we go ahead with meet January 30th at 1 o'clock.
Are we still doing the budget then?
Yes.
Right, I think that was at
It's
4
not
o'clock.
till later, yes.
Right.
I didn't have a date.
Well, let me see what time.
I didn't have a time.
Add later, but it doesn't matter. If it works.
I had special board meeting presentation of budget, but I didn't have a time on it either. For the January 30th. I didn't have time, so I just had to put it on my calendar.
Right, I think we put it on our calendar
Okay,
as a
so
4
no
o'clock
time.
because that's when we,
Okay.
so we were thinking that would give us from 1 o'clock till, we've done that in the past.
Right.
Giving us till at least, 3:30 for some quality work time, and then we could start the budget session at 4. We are certainly open to changing that at the will of the board.
Yeah, and I think Tom is just reflecting the ambitious nature. I mean, the one is tied to the other, as you all know, of the planning and budget process. And you got to kind of pitch a perfect game that day for things to work out really well. But we'll see what we'll work hard at it.
Okay.
So I had a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further questions or discussions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion passed on January 9th. Clarification or questions on January 30th a special board meeting begin at 1 o'clock.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all. I mean, Fred, all of you have been a part of that. I know it's a lot of
very
work and a lot of time.
comprehensive. It was, I would have to shout out the entire team because it's a lot of fun.
And it's incredible the amount of work that you put into this, but it's going to be an incredible amount of work to make some decisions.
I know we're behind public comment, but we did look earlier. We did not have any. So next we have our student board member report. And like I said before, Cheyenne stayed home due to the weather, but she did send an email, and I'm going to read on her update. I sincerely apologize for not being able to attend the board meeting, but weather conditions didn't permit me to attend. Each council has been very busy in the past month. Northern Middle School recently is currently organizing their annual Relay for Life team and is planning their snowball dance. Southern Middle School has recently taken part in the Rotary Christmas project and is planning on assisting with the canned food drive that is occurring in downtown Oakland. Northern High School recently held their War of the Classes, where they raised around $400 for charity. The next event they are planning is their annual Winter Wish Week, where they receive wishes from students and meet as many of them as they can. Southern High School is holding their first Powerpuff Volleyball on December 22nd and is in the process of organizing their January dress swap. They will be hosting Southern's Winter Homecoming Wish. It is a masquerade theme this year. In the past, GCASC has been very active. On November 18th, a group of students representing Garrett County traveled to Baltimore and took part in MASC's Fall Leadership Conference, where we listened to speaker Robert Pruitt, attended 2 workshops, and listened to MASC's first Maryland Talk. On November 22nd, members decorated a Christmas tree for Festival Trees. Its theme was Jingle Paws and was decorated with homemade pet treats, toys, and had 2 bags of dog food and cat food under it. Both high schools and middle schools contributed to the decorations on the tree. On November 30th, GCASC held their first General Assembly meeting at Southern High School. Student council members from both middle school and both high schools engaged in a parliamentary procedure workshop that was presented by members of GCAS Executive Board and took part in a General Assembly meeting where GCASC's Constitution and bylaws were amended and updated. Finally, this past Sunday, GCASC had our annual Christmas party and December meeting at Lido's. During the meeting, Paige Smith was elected as Assistant Secretary for GCASC. Afterwards, we went caroling at Cherry Hill Assisted Living. Thank you, Cheyenne, for submitting that to us. That was a lot of busy. We're very busy. And the festival trees, I actually see their tree, and that was very nice. And I actually got to see her down there decorating it. And I'm very proud of the students in Garrett County. A lot of the festival trees, were different organizations in the county, but you had FFA there, you had 4-H, you had Southern Middle, Northern Middle, you had Girl Scouts, which involved our students, 4-H, which involved them. So there was a lot of teachers, students. So I was very happy with what they did.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yes.
You'll notice that she also mentioned the Rotary Christmas Project. We just concluded that last weekend, and I wanted to thank again Mr. Woods. The WGW Foundation made a significant donation. I just received in the mail from the St. Paul Ladies Auxiliary a very significant donation, so I wanted to thank you as well. I believe Ms. Rinker gave some gifts for under our tree, and we actually were able to serve 174 of our Garrett County families this year with our Christmas project, and 152 of our seniors, and we provide them with a $50 gift card for needy seniors in our area as well. So thanks to each of you, anyone that contributed, and I was really happy to see Southern Middle was a participant as well. So thank you.
Does anyone else have any more board member updates?
Looking forward to going to some of the holiday
festivities
programs. Hopefully the weather will clear up and those can happen.
We have before us our informational items, our school activities for December 2017, and homeschool connection. So, do I have a motion at 8:30 to adjourn our meeting?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
I've seen you move so fast.
Our meeting